Hello everyone, my name is Chrissy and welcome to my channel. Today I am finally doing my wrap up for January. School started back up again, so my videos will probably be a little bit sporadic, but who cares about that? Let's just get into the books that I read. The first book that I completed for January is Hello Stranger by Lisa Kleypas. This is the fourth book in the Ravenelle series, which is a historical romance series that at first I didn't think I would like as much, but it turns out I'm addicted and I just need to save up money so I can get the next two books. Hello Stranger features Garrett Gibson, who is the only female physician that we know of in London at the time, and Ethan Random, who is a type of spy. He works for the secret government agency who does like these different types of investigations, and Ethan is trying to find corruption within the government. Ethan thinks that it is too dangerous to get into a relationship in this book, and Garrett doesn't really care about the danger. That's pretty much the whole plot. I liked it though. I liked Garrett as a character and I liked Ethan as well, and their story was a nice break from the high society type of stories that the other Ravenelle books bring. So instead of this being about arranged marriage or about, someone going out into the seasons to try and find a husband or a wife, this is about two people who are extraordinary and their extraordinary circumstances of being together and trying for a relationship. The next book I read is The Deep by River Solomon. This is about the descendants of these women who are thrown from slave ships, these pregnant African women who were thrown, and the descendants, in order to adapt to their environment, are now able to breathe underwater and live in the ocean. In order to kind of cope with this traumatic experience that they go through, they decide to put all their memories into one person known as the historian. And the historian in the Deep, in that current time period, is Yetu. And Yetu does not want to be the historian. She's having a hard time with it. It's really hard. It's rough. Imagine carrying so many hard and tough memories and the feelings that go with it in you. That's really just not, I don't think a lot of people could do it. So understandably, she doesn't want to be the historian anymore. So that's pretty much what the story is about, is her not wanting to be the historian and how that kind of manifests in the future. I will say that I like this book a lot. I thought that it was really well written, and it is a novella. It's a really short book, but I felt like it fit within the page numbers. And a lot of novellas that I read have really big ideas, and then there's just not enough time in that book, in those page numbers, to have any kind of world building, or at least the world building is so minimal that it just doesn't feel complete to me. So it feels like it should be a longer book. But this book in particular didn't do that. I actually felt like it was a very complete story, very well rounded. River Solomon does a great job of explaining the descendants and how they came to be, and also just the world that they live in, and also the social structures that they have. The next book that I completed is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. And this is the first book I have read in verse. And it's about this gal named Xiomara who is known as the Poet X. And really, if I could summarize the plot of this book, it would be about relationships. So relationships that she has with her mom, the relationship that she has with her friends and her brother, and the new relationship that begins in this book, and also her relationship with strangers. So people who don't know Xiomara look at her and make snap judgments about who she is as a person. Like, she has not been intimate with anyone, but people automatically assume that she's been sleeping with everyone and their mothers. It's a really good look about how people are judged based on their body types, when that shouldn't be the case. Don't do it. Overall, a really good read. I was happy I read it, and I will definitely be reading more of Elizabeth Acevedo's work. The next book I read was Scandal in Spring by Lisa Kleypas. This is also a fourth book in a series by Lisa Kleypas, though this follows the Wallflower series. This follows a character named Daisy. She's the last of the group of friends known as the Wallflowers, to attempt to get married. So Daisy's father pretty much says that she's going to marry this one guy named Matthew, who Daisy has known for a long time. Daisy doesn't want that, so there is now a plot put in by Daisy and the other Wallflowers to try and get her a husband other than Matthew. I like this book. I like the Wallflower series a lot. I don't really have too much else to say about this book because I feel like I'm gonna ruin like a lot of the series if I just go on about why this book is good as it is, or why I like the series as it is. Next, The Ghost by Danielle Steel. This is the first book by Danielle Steel I have ever read. This is about a guy named Charlie who lives in London, and he's an architect, and his wife asked for a divorce because she had been cheating on him. And she couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't lie to herself or anyone else. And Charlie is understandably heartbroken. Now, in the middle of that heartbreak, to kind of put the cherry on top of that sundae, Charlie gets transferred by his job to New York. He doesn't want to move to New York. He really likes London. He really likes Europe. But he doesn't, I guess, feel like he should quit at this point in time. So he moves to New York and works at the firm in New York. He finds that he doesn't like the position that he's been put in and that his talents are going to waste. So at one point he goes to his bosses and says, you know what, this is a little bit much. We need to change things. They say no, and he says, I need a sabbatical. So he ends up taking this really long vacation and going to, I think it's supposed to be Vermont, but he's supposed to go skiing, and he ends up at this cabin and meeting the owner of that cabin, and he just really likes the feel of the place. He really likes the owner, and so he asks if he can rent the place out. And the owner says yes, so he rents out this place. And thus begins the story. Apparently, the house is haunted by this ghost named Sarah. It's not a bad haunting, like Sarah doesn't really do much. So like she appears and she's like, hey. She doesn't really talk either, just the wave. Charlie gets a little bit obsessed with the story of Sarah. She had run away from an abusive husband back in Europe and ended up moving to the United States, as small as it was back in the late 1700s, and how she meets this other guy named Francois, and finds love again. Overall, I'm not the biggest fan of Danielle Steel's writing. I find that she tells rather than shows a little bit too much. And plus I was more interested in Sarah's story than I was in Charlie's. To be fair, I didn't really care about Charlie's story at all. Now, I forgot to say at the beginning, I did buddy read this book with Angie from Literary Labors. You guys should definitely check out her channel. She's amazing. She finished this book far faster than I did, and I think has a lot more kind things to say about it. And it's not that it's entirely bad, it's just the writing style is just not to my taste. The next book I read is A Wallflower Christmas by Lisa Kleypas. This is a novella little sequel to the Wallflower series, and it features the Bowman's brother, Raph. And it's about his romance that he has. Now, Raph originally comes to London to see his sisters, and also to do business, and also to meet this gal to see if he wants to marry her. The gal he's meeting is named Natalie, but Raph ends up falling in love for Natalie's lady-in-waiting, who is named Hannah. I'm not the biggest fan of Raph, mainly because he has like a line in there that's, in America, we keep kissing girls until they give in, and sir, that's not how this goes. No, we don't. We shouldn't, at the very least. But admittedly, I was still drawn into the story, not for the love aspect, but because I got to see some of my favorite characters, and I got to see the Wallflower gang meet up again and come up with different plots of funness. The next book I read is Conan Doyle for the Defense, The True Story of a Sensational British Murder, A Quest for Justice, and the World's Most Famous Detective Writer. This is about, of course, Arthur Conan Doyle and how he steps in for the defense of this guy named Oscar Slater. Oscar had a really grave miscarriage of justice. He was charged with murder, but the amount of evidence that said he didn't do it was just so overwhelming. However, because of attitudes towards Jewish people at that time, and them saying he was a pimp and all this kind of stuff, caused it to where the jury pretty much said that he was guilty. Now, someone lets Arthur Conan Doyle know, and if nothing else, this author does not like it when people ignore evidence. He hates it with a passion. So he decides to throw his hat in the ring and tries to get this guy's sentence overturned. I also just realized I forgot to say that the author's name is Margaret Fox. I really like this book. I thought that the author did a good job of presenting the case, showcasing what the evidence was, giving good reason and good information on why it is that this guy was charged with murder, and also the steps that were taken to try and help free him. The next book I read is Something from the Night Side by Simon R. Green. This is a reread for me, and it is a urban fantasy which takes place in London and features a guy named John Taylor who is a private investigator. Now, there is a kind of secret side of London called the Night Side. And this is kind of where magic and all that kind of stuff happen. It's the really dark parts of London. People get messed up there all the time. John Taylor actually has a very particular gift of finding things. But he had left the Night Side because people had betrayed him. He was pretty much close to dying, and he was trying to just get out of there. A case is brought before John, and he decides to take it and return to the Night Side. And thus begins the story. Overall, I really like this book. I read it about 10 years ago, and I liked it then, and I like it now. The last book I read is The Honey Don't List by Christina Lauren. Now, this follows two characters named Carrie and James, and they're the assistants of this celebrity couple. Now, this celebrity couple are kind of home renovators, and they did a TV show where they were renovating houses and all that kind of stuff. So one of them does design work, which that is Melissa? Yes, Melissa Tripp. And the other one is in carpentry, and he builds those designs, and that is Rusty. Now, Rusty and Melissa's marriage is on the rocks, which is ironic because they wrote a book about marriage advice, and they're supposed to go on a book tour. Carrie and James are then put to the job of making sure that these two do not fight or don't let pretty much paparazzi or the fans know that they're having relationship troubles. And this brings a whole bunch of hoopla that ends up happening. And it's wonderful hoopla. But during this whole shenanigans-filled event, James and Carrie get closer and they end up having a relationship while they go about their business. I love Christina Lauren's romance books. So actually, one thing I will talk about is that I thought this did a really good job of talking about toxic relationships between people who are like in a mentor-mentee relationship or someone that you feel as a surrogate parent. And primarily between Carrie and Melissa, they have a really rocky type of relationship, but Carrie so desperately wants to please Melissa and just keep up the status quo that's just really unhealthy. And Melissa's a bit abusive at times, emotionally and verbally so. I just thought it was handled really well. Like, it brought a certain kind of depth and complexity that I wasn't really expecting from this book, but I'm glad it was there. Thank you so much for watching. That is my wrap-up for January. I didn't make a TBR video for February. I'm hoping to start back up with TBRs in March. If you've read any of the books that I have mentioned, please let me know down below. Or based on any of the books that I mentioned, is there a book you think I would like? Please share. And as always and forever, may you get lost in a book.